So good morning, Venerable Sangha, scholars, practitioners, participants from home and abroad, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to an international conference on Unravelling the Metric, Patthana, Bhavanga, and Abhidhamma meditation at Shan State Buddhist University, SSBU. My name is Venerable Devendra Pipala, lecturer of SSBU and head department of Buddhist sociology. So to begin our program for this morning, may I now invite our Rector Sayadaw to light the candle to open our session this morning. And after lighting the candle, may I invite our Rector Sayadaw to take a seat, and then we will invite all the Venerable Sangha on the stage to do a chanting for the blessing of 55th birthday of our Rector Sayadaw. So may I now respectfully request Venerable Sangha from Thailand to do the chanting for the blessing. Please, Venerable Sir.
นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังสรณังคัจฉามิธัมมังสรณังคัจฉามิสังฆังสรณังคัจฉามิทุติยมปิพุทธังสรณังคัจฉามิทุติยมปิธัมมังสรณังคัจฉามิทุติยมปิสังฆังสรณังคัจฉามิตติยมปิพุทธังสรณังคัจฉามิตติยมปิธัมมังสรณังคัจฉามิตติยมปิสังฆังสรณังคัจฉามิสัมพุทเถอัตถวิสัญจะทวาทัสสัญจะสหัสสะเกมปัญจะสัตตสหัสสานินามามิสิรสาอะหังเตสังธัมมันจะสังขันจะอาทะเรนะนามามิหังนามการานุภาเวนะหันตวาสัพเพอุปัฏฐเวอเนกาอันตรายาปิวินาสันตุอาเสสะโตสัมพุทเถปัญจปัญญาสัญจะจตุเวสติสหัสสะเกธาสัสสตสหัสสานินามามิสิรสาอะหังเตสังธัมมันจะสังขันจะอาทะเรนะนามามิหังนามการานุภาเวนะหันตวาสัพเพอุปัฏฐเวอเนกาอันตรายาปิวินาสันตุอาเสสะโตสัมพุทเถนะวุตรสเตอัฏฐจัตตาลิสหัสสะเกวิสติสัตตสหัสสานินามามิสิรสาอะหังเตสังธัมมันจะ ข ขันจะอาทะเรนะนัมมามิหังนัมการานุภาเวนะหันตวาสัพเพอุปัฏฐเวอเนกาอันตรายาปิวินาสันตุอาเสสาโตนะโมอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะมะเหสิโนนะโมอุตตมะธัมมัสสะสวากขาตัสเสวะเตนิธานโมมหาสังฆาสาปิวิสุทธาเสลเทถิโนนะโมโอมัตตยาราทัสสะรัตนาตยาสสาธุกังนะโมโอมกาเตตัสสะตัสสะวัตถุตยาสปินะโมการาปภาเวนวิคัจจันตุปัฏฐวานะโมการานุภาเวนสุวัตถิโหตุสัพพทานะโมการาสเตเชนะวิธิมหิโหมิเตยมัตถกุสเลนะยันตังสันตังปะทังอภิสเมจัสสะโกอุชัวจะสุชัวจะสุวโจจัตสมุทุอนัตติมาเนสันตุสโกจะสุภโรจะอาปกิจโจจะสันเลากวุติสันตินทริโยจะนิปโกจะอาปคาโพกุเลสุอนันนุขิตโทนะจะโคทังสมาจเรกินจิเยนะวินโยปะเรอุปวัฏไทยโยงสุขิโนวาเขมิโนโห นตุสัพเพสัตตาภวันตุสุขิตาตาเยเกจิปานภัวตาติตาสาวาทาวราวาอนวเสสาวาเยมหันตาวามัชฌิมาราสกาอนุกถุลาเทถาวาเยจะอดิตถาเยจะตุเรอสันติอวิทุเรภูตาวาสัมภเวสีวาสัพเพสัตตาตุสุขิตาตานปโรปรังนิโกเพธนาติมันเยทากาทจินังกินจิพยาโรสันปฏิฆสัญญานันยมันยาสตุขเมตชัยยมาตายฐานิยังปุตตังอายุสาเอกปุตตมนุราเขเอวัมปิสัพพพุเตสุมาณสัมภาวะเยอปริมาณังอุตจะสัพพโลกัสมิงมานะสัมภาวะเยอปริมาณังทางอโทจติริยันจะอสัมภาทางอเวรังอสปัตตังนิสินโนวาสยานุวายาวตาสวิคตเมตโทเอตังสติงอทิฏฐัยยพรหมเมตังวิหารังอิธัมมาหุเทถินจะอนุปคัมมเสลวาตาสเนนะสัมปันโนกาเมสุเวนัยยะเคทางในชาตุคาปัสไสยังปุณเรเตเตโพชังโคสติสังขาโตธรรมานังวิจโยตถาวิริยัมเปติปัสสัตถิโพชังคาจตถาปเรสมาธุเปกโพชังคาสัตเตเตสัพพทัสสินามุนินาสัมมาทาคาตาภาวิตาภาหุลิกตาสังวัตตันติปะมิญญายสิพานายจโบติยาเอเตนะสัจจวัชเชนะโสทิเตโหตุสัพพทากัสมิงสมัยเยนาโทโมคัลลานันจะกัสสปังกิลาเนตัวกิเตทิสวะโพชังเคสัตตเทสยิเตจะตังอภินันทิสตวาโลคาโมดเจงสุตังคะเนเอเตนะสัจจวัชเชนะโสทิเตโหตุสัพพทาเอกทาธรรมราเชปิเคลันเยนาพิเปลิโตจุนทาเทเรนตันเยวพันนาเปตตวานาสาธรังสัมมวติตวังภาทาตัมหาวุฒาสิทานะโสเอเตนะสัจจวัชเชนะโสทิเตโหตุสัพพทาปหินาเตจะอาภาธาตินนันนัมปิมเหสินังมัคคาหตกิเลสาวปัตตานุปัตติธรรมตังเอเตนะสัจจวัชเชนะโสทิเตโหตุสัพพทาชยันโตโพธิยาโมเลสักยานังนันทิวัฒโนเอวังตวังวิชโยโหหิชยัสสุชยมังกะเลอปราชิตปันลังเกสีเสปัทวิโปคะเรอภิเสเกสัพพ พุทธานังอาคาปัตโตปโมทติสุนาขัดตังสุมังคลังสุปาพาตังสุโหติตังสุขโนสุโมโหตัวจะสุเยทังพรหมจาริสุปทาขินังกายกรรมังวาจากรรมังปทาขินังปทาขินังมโนกรรมังปณิเทเตขินาปทาขินานิกัตวานลพันตาเทปทาขิเนภวตุสัพพมังคลังรากันตุสัพพเทวตาสัพพพุทธานุภาเวนัสทธาโสทิภวันตุเตภวตุสัพพมังคลังราคันตุสัพพเทวตาสัพพธรรมานุภาเวนัสทธาโสทิภวันตุเตภวตุสัพพมังคลังราคันตุสัพพเทวตาสัพพสังฆานุภาเวนัสทธาโสทิภวันตุเต
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Just for your information, the Venerable sitting on my right is the abbot of the biggest Pali teaching monastery in Bangkok. He has 400 plus Pali students, monks and novices in his temple in Bangkok. And next to him is the assistant of his teacher, there's the Venerable B.A. Payuttu. So this is his assistant, and all his teachers' writing, he has been part of it. And you know him already. Yesterday he was educated here in Myanmar and also in Thailand. Now he is the master of recycling and Dhamma teacher. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rector Seado, for introducing the senior Sangha from Thailand. And I thank you very much, all the venerable members of the Sangha from Thailand, for your blessing for our Rector Seado. So now the program is our main sponsor of our events. Yom Pasathorn and group from Thailand will offer requisite to the Venerable Sangha. Please. Okay, from Thailand, you can participate in the offering. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
And the third one over there is the meditation master.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
And the other one, the one in maroon color, is a Burmese Pali scholar teaching in Thailand in his monastery.
Okay, the last row can donate after. Okay, now may I request the Venerable Sangha to sit back in the front, and then we will begin our paper reading session. Venerable Sangha, please take your seat. And may I also request our Rector Seado to remain seated to chair the session of the panel 5. Session panel 5 will be on applications of the Patthana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much, all the Venerable Sangha from Thailand, for doing the chanting for the blessing of our Rector Seattle.
Okay, good morning. Venerable Mahasangha, distinguished guest, scholar, and nuns, ladies and gentlemen. Today, this is our second day of our conference, international conference on Unravelling metric, the Patthana, Bhavanga, and Abhidhamma meditation. So this morning, the main theme for this morning application of the Patthana. This section will be chaired by our Rector Seattle, Venerable Professor Dr. Khammai Dhammasami. And then in this section, we have two speakers, Professor Dr. Sharak Shaw, University of Oxford and University of South Wales, UK. And then Mr. Kik Manning, University of Manchester and Foundation and Trust and Samatha Trust, UK. Seeing our chair and the speaker already on the stage. So may I hand over this section to our chair, Rector Seattle, to lead this section. Thank you very much, sir.
Good morning, Venerable scholars, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday was a very, I'm not sure, the word that comes to my mind is intensifying, but at times also free flowing. But in any case, okay, for some people it must have been overwhelming. A lot of theories and combination, permutation, and all those things. Now, this panel is about application. Another aspect that many people are very interested, the application of the Abhidhamma. For this, I have Dr. Sarasho from the Department of Continuing Education and Wolfson College, University of Oxford. Her first background is in classic and English. Classic means over there studying Greek and that English literature, and she did her doctorate in that. And she came to Oxford to study Pali. Her main Pali teachers, Professor Richard Cambridge, which is my supervisor, and also Dr. Lance Carson, about whom we have been referring to yesterday. Dr. Shaw has published a few books on meditation, some of them by, I think, by Yale University. But Routledge and Yale University. And she is not new to Myanmar. She has been here for conference and also for research. One of her latest books on Jataka is Zato, or Chadok in Thai. To published quite recently, that one she covers quite a few. Of course, Abhidhamma is one of her main interests. So I'd like to invite Dr. Shaw to present her paper. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, I to interrupt a moment. If you need interpreter device, we have provided at the back, so you can take the interpretation device.
Which number can you say? Which language for which number?
Number one is in Burmese, and then second is Thai, and third is Chinese.
Okay.
Thank you, Saido. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here today after this wonderful chanting. Venerable sirs, venerable sisters, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be able to address the four assemblies, because I feel when I come here that all four are so important to keep the Buddhist sasana going. I would like to talk today about my experience of working with the Patthana, which I think will be quite different from other people here. But I want to explain it because I have found them so inspiring and helpful. But also because I very much hope that they will become more well known in the West. And I would like to tell you some of the ways that we have tried to work with them in the West. I was introduced to them by Dr. Friedgard Lottermoser after having meditated for about 10 years, and I'd studied the Abhidhamma Sangha and the Dhammasami. And my teacher, L.S. Cousins, suggested that Friedgard would be a very good person to take a course at our centre in Manchester on the Patthana. And there was something about the approach of that weekend and the way it was taught that has stayed with me really all my life. So I still love chanting the Patthana. So I'd just like to say a few things that are so helpful about the Patthana to get an understanding of one's own mind. The chant she taught is the 3/4 of an hour long one, which I'm not sure what the Burmese name for it is. It's a kind of selection from the Patthana. So you go, he tu, sampayutakanang dhammanang tang samutananang charupanang, he tu, pachena, pachayo. And we learnt the whole of that, the 45 minutes. So, although I teach at the university in Oxford, and I teach students doing doctorates and MAs and higher research, I think I've always had a very great affection for teaching at the College of Adult Education, which is people from the general public come to learn what is being taught in Oxford. So I teach a class there on Buddhism, and they always want to know about Abhidhamma because I advertise it as Buddhist mindfulness and psychology. So this is a very attractive title to Westerners, and the classes are always oversubscribed. Venerable Davinda rightly pointed out to me 2 days ago that actually it's Buddhist psychology and matter. So I think I'll have to change the title to Buddhist psychology and the world or something, because the wonderful thing about Buddhist psychology is it does deal with matter. And also, Keith will be speaking about the 6 pairs, which are in both the body and the mind. What is wonderful about Buddhist psychology and the world is that it actually addresses the person as a complete human being in the world with a body. So, I had a class which had 3 psychiatrists in, 12 people, and they asked if they could do a little bit more about the theory of Buddhist psychology. So I decided to teach the Patthana. There were 12 people in the class. There were the 3 psychiatrists, 5 long-standing Buddhists, so some were Tibetan Buddhists and other kinds of Buddhists, and 1 person had just walked in off the street and didn't know anything about Buddhism at all. So it was a very representative class. And so I decided to see whether the Patthana would work as a system of psychology without any reference to academic textbooks if they wanted to read, they could, but just looking at their own experience. So they weren't even necessarily Buddhists, they were people who live normal lives. There was 1 person in the group who was a little vulnerable because she'd had some condition, psychiatric condition, but she managed well as well. So the exercises we did were very light. So we started doing the Patthana by doing a triad roughly each week. And we spent a long time, 2 sessions on the first triad. And after that, we moved with increasing acceleration through the rest. Now, this is, of course, completely familiar to everybody here, the idea that there are skillful routes and unskillful routes. It really isn't to people in the West. And this is why the Patthana has so much to offer the West. A lot of people in Oxford, particularly where it's very popular, have learnt mindfulness training, but they have no psychological framework to fit it in. So they do the training and then they learn Western psychology as a means of understanding this. I don't think, personally, this is particularly helpful, because if you take an element which is so deeply embedded in one tradition, an indigenous tradition, yes, it's very nice to be able to learn the techniques, but it's not the same as understanding how it was taught and where it comes from. So one of the psychiatrists in the group had been to Southeast Asia because his son had married a Southeast Asian girl. And he went to this very remote village in the hills, and he met people who asked him what his job was. So he said, "I'm a psychiatrist." So they did not understand what a psychiatrist was. He had to explain it. Because if you have a problem and you are a devout Buddhist, there are ways of addressing it and finding help. People will help you, they will chant. You understand psychology, and you don't even use the word psychology. You understand your mind as being part of a context which is very supportive. So we spent a whole session on the first Pachaya, roots, because Western psychology, as I was told by these psychiatrists, doesn't have a stated aim, in a way. Whereas Buddhist psychology is trying to arouse the Bojangas, but also it's trying to show a path, a graduated path. And this is actually what is now needed in the West after we've had the introduction to the mindfulness training. We now need to have a sense of what you can do with it and where you can take it. So they were very interested in this as a way of showing that the mind doesn't have to be bad. Unfortunately, in my classes, both in the university and in the college, people love dependent origination. They love all the negative terms there about craving and suffering. But it's very difficult for them to understand that the mind might have some positive roots as well, and that the Pabhasara Chitta is very important, the radiant mind. So I must keep within my... just some themes that I introduced very, very lightly while I was teaching it were the very notion of skillful and unskillful consciousness. And instead of giving them the Dhammasami list, I asked them to say what they felt was in the mind when the mind was skillful. And they said, "Oh, I feel open, I have loving kindness, flexibility, adaptability, freedom." And then you put up their list and put it next to the Dhammasami list, and it's about the same. It's as if the Dhammasami is a checklist. So trusting the people to find their own formulations. I won't dwell on all of these, but these are just a few of the aspects of the Abhidhamma which it's helpful to introduce. For instance, mindfulness as one determinant of skillful consciousness is very useful. The idea of the 7 universals, that consciousness shares attributes, that some consciousness is particulars, and we look at the divine abidings and wisdom. These are all very active debates within Oxford academic communities at the moment, because the mindfulness movement has been criticised for lacking an ethical sense and lacking a sense of the divine abidings. So people really enjoy the theory, basic psychological theory associated with it. All consciousness has an object, so we can move on to that, and people sense that. Is the object of be, and that an object can affect how you are. And people talk about how when they go for walks in the country, they feel the objects are restoring their mind. So this is a useful way of looking at object condition. Dominating condition, people find very interesting, because we talk about the 4 different ways you get jobs done. And sometimes you do it from willingness. Sometimes you have to really work hard. Sometimes you just find you can do something if you can just do a skill very naturally. And sometimes you have to investigate. And for this, we use the famous similes for the Patthana, where each one has a simile. And this is the universal monarch has no rival to his influence. So people can immediately understand in a secular context what dominating condition is and feel it's a helpful way of describing their own approach to jobs and tasks. So this is really what I've said here. Chanda, willingness. And the interesting thing about Chanda, this issue came up yesterday, willingness, the wish to do, can be unskillful, and we discussed it with regard to chanting if you want to do too much. But it is also skillful, so you can have wish to do, and the wish to do more chanting, which is actually skillful chatasika, and the chanting will purify it. So some of these people didn't know anything about Buddhism, so it shows, I want to impress upon you how generally applicable these features are. So then we look at precedents, preceding condition, A precedes B, that the state of mind, one thing you're doing ceases before another. And the samanantra, immediately preceding condition. So what people have been doing on the way to the class, that was perhaps their immediately preceding condition. And then sahajata, that things arise together. And again, this is very important. You think, well, the famous images of the flame and the light, sometimes things emerge together. But for people in Oxford who are studying mindfulness and working with it, the notion that a consciousness could arise with other factors at the same time, that mindfulness arises with loving kindness or compassion or equanimity or sympathetic joy, that arises with self-respect, it arises with hiriyanatapa. All of these things which you have been studying for years are actually live debates in Western discourse, but they don't know the theory that gave rise to them. So this is why I feel it's very important for you to communicate this. So after we'd done all the pachayas and people had just got a feeling for each one, they didn't have to have a very strong understanding. We then looked at the Sutanta approach to Abhidhamma, which is taking things in real time as an experience. Just take some water. Yeah. Now, in Abhidhamma, we have things arising in a moment, but the Sutanta approach is to take an example in your own experience and try and relate it to that. The Burmese have a wonderfully rich tradition of doing this. Andrew Deed was telling me yesterday about the Burmese images for the Patthana. Yeah. So let's take an example which I did with them, which is very apt, and it will only take a few minutes. These are people who, some of whom did not know any Buddhism at all, but wanted to apply the Patthana to their own experience. So let's take an example. Now, I'd like you to imagine a very nice monastery and temple and university in the hills somewhere, and it's got a very popular abbot. And let's imagine that there's perhaps a few people, perhaps one lady in particular, who decides it would be very nice to have a birthday celebration to celebrate this abbot's presence in this monastery. So let's see if we can see if the Patthana apply to the birthday celebration. This is in a completely imaginary situation, yeah. In this ideal world where all the four assemblies are present and we're all studying the Patthana. It couldn't happen anywhere in real life. So, was the volition skillful? Did the lady and the team who set it up have skillful volition. Yes, I think we're agreed on that. They had a wish to be generous, they had loving kindness for all the followers, and they had wisdom. They saw it would be a very good thing to do. So the object was the celebration. Now this, of course, is where the Sutanta approach is not the same as the moment-by-moment approach, because you take a complex object. You use it in your own real experience. Right back to the time of the commentaries, this happens. They take experience as a guideline to Abhidhamma. People always say, oh, Abhidhamma's got no similes and stories and images, but actually it's got lots, and the Burmese have a very rich tradition of doing this. So the object is the celebrating. Then we have the dominating condition. Were the organizers acting from willingness, strength, chitta, their heart, state of mind, or from investigation? In my experience of working at an event, sometimes you feel willing, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes you feel strong, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you feel you're in the mood, and sometimes you don't. But all the time you have to investigate. So these are very good. So prior arising, anantara, were the plans before and all the preparations. Now, everybody knows who gives a celebration that you think you've done everything, but there's a samanantara immediately before. You have to work very, very hard, and because there's always last-minute things to do. And then arising together, here we all are. It's like all the skillful chittasakas arising in one moment of mindfulness. Everybody's here. So we are all joined together by the fact it's sahajata condition. Okay. So we're in the event. Now, I think we've all noticed a moment or a time in a conference when people actually start to talk to each other and engage. Before then, they're all there, but they're not anyamanya. And I'm using it in a metaphoric sense. So interdependence happens. You want it to happen. You want people to get to know each other. We depend on funding, on people's kindness, on generosity. So the nisaya is very important for a conference. It wouldn't happen without the people who kindly support it, from either financially, sweeping the yard, collecting together the rubbish. All these are nisaya. It won't happen beforehand. If we lost the water today, where would the conference be? We need this support. Strong dependence, upanisaya, it is a person or a food or a season or perhaps an occasion. So I think the strong dependence here, the upanisaya, is the fact that this monastery and temple has an abbot with a birthday. I think that must be the upanisaya. Purijata, now these are the actual causal conditions that arise, that influence this present event. So if the planning has been good, everybody will be happy. But if the planning had been bad, purijata would have been unskillful condition and would not have worked. But here it was good. Pachajata is my favorite one because I don't understand it, but I like it. And that is the fact that we know this conference is going to have a wonderful effect in the future, and that is our nourishment. The famous image for this is vultures who survive when they're hungry because they know their mother's going to come back and bring them food. So the future condition affecting this conference is that we just know it's going to have a good effect. Asavana, becoming strong through repetition. So we're meeting, we're practicing, we're chatting. The conference builds up a life of its own. It has its own life. Now, this is where Khammai is very important because, if you're nasty to somebody in the conference, you won't enjoy it as much. You will feel upset. Whereas it's something that needs to be renewed all the time, the skillfulness. And then you can enjoy all the benefits. The vipaka, which becomes then a kind of, this cycle becomes then a kind of food, We've had the most wonderful first kind of food in this conference, but we've also had the other kinds of food, contacts, volitions, and vijnana, all the states of mind of people. We're having a very rich diet. So we find that indriya, there is strength aroused in us and joyfulness. If we have, in all that free time we go and meditate, we do practice jhana, but I don't think we've had much time to practice here. But we certainly have a sense of path, magga. Now this path is one that leads to somewhere which cannot have a relationship with the path condition at all, I'm told. But I think it's like the road to the temple is not the temple, but still you need the road to get to the temple. Yeah. So, Sampayutta, we are all together. This is, we are connected together in some way. We are in this moment. But we are all quite separate. And this is also very important in a conference, at any other situation, to know that we each have our own Khamma. We're separate from each other. So we are now getting to the stage, well, we will this evening, when we must disperse. And I think it's very interesting that at the end of an event, which we haven't reached yet, there is a moment of ati, I always think. It's like everybody is there, presence condition. And it's the same in a party in a quite secular sense. And then everybody goes, vigata. Now, what is interesting is this is not an annihilationist list in a way. It has this kind of odd contradiction at the end, not departed. So when we've all gone, the organizers will sit and they'll have a cup of tea, and the whole event will be finished. It will be over. But it's like when you give a really good party, afterwards you feel, oh, it's all done, it's wonderful relief. Something remains, is not departed. So I very much hope that at the end of the conference you all feel that avigata has operated. This is a wonderful teaching, and it was very impressive to me how people some of whom had no contact with Buddhism and perhaps had done mindfulness training, but even not that, saw immediately the truthfulness of the causal relations. I've taken a very light-hearted example, but the psychiatrists and the health workers I teach know that the implications are far more profound than that. Well, as profound. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sarasho. Listening to you at times, I feel I might be in the wrong place, being the strong support Upanishya for the event. We have Q&A at the end, so now I'd like to move to the next speaker. That is Keith Manning, another colleague from the UK. We work together in chaplaincy in the UK. He is the leader. He trains Buddhist chaplains in both higher education, also in hospital chaplaincy. And of course, he started as a teacher, as a school teacher, where he rose to the position of training other teachers before he came to do all these extra and extraordinary things with with the Dhamma, and I should mention, some of you may be interested. Both Sarah and Keith are meditation teachers as well. So I think without eating up your time, I should handle microphone to you, so the floor is yours. By the way, samatha, the title samatha, yoga, vajra, and Patthana, a higher alchemy. So this is his title. So we listen to him.
Thank you, Venerable Dhammasami. Venerable bhikkhus, venerable nuns, scholars, ladies and gentlemen. Is this working? Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel very privileged to have a chance to share with you some work that's been going on, very new work. So there's really two themes in this talk. The title, Samatha, Yoga, Vichara, Patthana, are some of the areas that we've been working with. But this is really a talk about something we've learnt and are developing in meditation centres or in temples, and how that work applies in the public space, in the public sector, in places like hospitals, in places like universities. Besides this one, many universities in the West are entirely secular places, and just what that word secular suggests. The Dalai Lama put me right on the word secular. When he talked in Manchester, he said, in Indian thinking, secular is a term of respect. In the West, we use the word as almost saying anti-religious, and that's very, very mistaken. So, how do I do this? Yes, here. I'd like to start talking a little bit about samatha practice, and many of you, all of you, will be familiar with 4 similes for jhana, although I've described these here as 4 similes for different lengths of breath that are used as one method for developing samatha vipassana that we use in the Samatha Trust. So we have the 4 similes, which are worth just very quickly reading the text. So the bath attendant, just as a skillful bath attendant or his apprentice heaps up bath powder in a lovely copper vessel, adds water to it, kneads it, makes it round, saturating it so that it adheres and does not scatter. Just so a meditator, having calmed his body and mind, produces joy and happiness and lets it evenly moisten and saturate him in such a way that there is no part of him that is not saturated with joy and happiness born of solitude. The simile of the pool of water, as in a pool of water with a spring into which no water flows from the 4 direction, nor rain descends, the water wells up, cool and pure from within, saturates the entire pool and overflowing spreads afar. Even so joy and happiness, cool and pure, welling up from concentration, saturates every part of the body of a meditator. The joy which is produced from concentration saturates the body and mind. Similarly of the lotus pond, just as in the pond of blue, red and white lotuses, the blue, red and white lotuses are born, grow and stand in the water and are immersed in the cold water from root to neck. So this body is filled and saturated with bliss that is free from joy. Similarly of the white cloth, as a man might sit down and cover his body with a white cloth from head to foot, in such a way that no part of his body is uncovered. So a meditator covers his body and limbs with purified mindfulness, in such a way that no part of him is not covered with purified mindfulness. And each of those similes seem to suggest to me 2 particularly important qualities of samatha practice. The sense of a purifying quality that's possible from working with each type of breath, or each type each aspect of practice, however you develop concentration in your practice. And each similarly emphasise this all-pervading, saturating nature to the effect of cultivating the quality of each breath, this all-pervading quality, which of course when we sit down to practice is not easy. It's not easy. And so in terms of a matrix of different teachings that we might apply, many people I've been working with in the Samatha tradition work with the model of the jhana factors, developing the jhana factors, and enabling those to arise out of transformation from hindrance, the nature of hindrance. That's hard work. That's not easy. So on one or two occasions, I tried as a bit of an experiment to have meditation sessions, half day, full day, and in fact on a recent meditation week, a practical week, we'd use the 6 beautiful pairs from the Abhidhamma as tools, as ways of which we can work with the breath and make the gross breath into a more subtle breath. We can work at that process of purifying the mind and body. Because one thing that's very apparent with samatha practice is it does need to be embodied. It's not just something it's not just something in the mind, it's not just an experience, not just a state, it's something that we embody. And so we worked with these 6 qualities of body and of mind, and found some remarkably beneficial effects for people who've worked in one part of the matrix and then just simply worked bringing these qualities into mind, or investigating these qualities, or making these qualities actually happen. So tranquility. Many people find that creating a state of more composure is a more useful way of understanding that, of perceiving that. Lightening, making the mind more buoyant, in particular, very useful if the mind is sleepy and sluggish. Making the mind more malleable. And I found quite often the word workable was used for mudita. But malleable seemed to be a more appropriate word, pliant, making the mind so that we can work, making the mind and body so that we can work better with it, so that we can get something of that quality of an all-pervading sense, an all-pervading experience of breathing mindfulness. Readiness, very interesting, that time when you know you're ready. Not when you need to be ready, but when you know that you're ready. Because one of the things I found a lot working with hospital patients is that they're continually finding they're reacting to things. Everything that comes their way, every single medical assessment or every single experience is being thrown at them, and they're reacting rather than responding. So responding has a more readiness, a greater measuredness about it. Proficiency, competence, just simply having that facility to be able to work the breath and make the breath a little bit subtle, a little bit more finer. And then uprightness, which is certainly something people experience after a samatha type practice of just simply feeling a little bit clearer, quality of clarity. So, as an experiment, and I'm using language like experiment because I wanted to see too how this sort of approach might be useful to build up more evidence of how working with meditation with patients and with hospital staff, how it would work and how we would actually gather the kind of evidence base that health services and other public sectors need to really appreciate and understand a little bit more about what works and how meditation has something to offer. For example, I found quite some years ago, working with hospital managers, talking about the Brahma Viharas, they really got that, because as managers, they had to think about how to work with difficult staff. And suddenly seeing a completely new model of emotional intelligence, if you like, was quite a groundbreaking thing for them. Just before I move into the chaplaincy questions a little bit more, it's also quite interesting looking at some of the Yoga Vichara material, which has its origins or some of the Samatha practices have their origins in the Yoga Vichara type material. One particular rather peculiar book that's published by the Pali Text Society that seems to have lots of mistakes in it. It says in the front, very apologetically, it was all done in a rush. Now, we all know that as writers, you know, but I'm not convinced that some of the ways in which the lists are repeated and then repeated slightly different isn't intentional. I've done some work on that, but I wouldn't like to make any particular claims. But one of the two of the things that are very interesting is the method, the approach that's presented. Firstly, of invoking the lineage, so being very clear what practice you're doing for why. And again, that has a great relevance in hospital chaplaincy, because in hospital chaplaincy, the purpose of mindfulness and meditation is to get well, is to recover health, which is not the purpose necessarily of a meditator, somebody joining a meditation school. The context, and this is the ethnographics that I'm interested in, the context is so different, and it's very useful to try in any situation to be very clear what is the context. So after invoking or making an offering to the goal of the teaching, to do some meditation on that arouses good qualities of joy, happiness, and so on and so forth. The manual talks then about the 6 pairs meditation. And it's much more a Manasikara type practice of bringing into the mind, deliberately bringing into mind. And this word okasa, which is an invocation, bringing something intentionally to mind, is mentioned over and over again with some awful translations of the word. But you've only got to say okasa in that way. You really know that it's an intentional bringing a quality into the mind. So when we sit and do the 6 pairs practice in that kind of way, bringing lightness as you're working with the breath, even saying the word lightness, and bringing the quality again and again into the mind. That's both samatha and vipassana there working. But the very interesting, it says in the manual to both do the practice in right succession and in reverse order. So not just tranquility, lightness, softness, but also doing the list in reverse. And they have very different effects. If I said too much about them, I'd be talking only about my personal experience. And likewise, it says with body and mind, that with whichever quality you work with, sometimes good to start with body and then mind, and sometimes start with mind and work with body. One of the languages, picking up on something Sarah said, one of the languages I found quite useful in presenting meditation in the health services has been just simply saying what we're doing is working with body, heart, and mind. And it's not a million miles away from this kind of practice. Body, heart, and mind, because somewhere deep in the values of healthcare is an idea of holistic care for the whole being. And what often happens in our modern hospitals is we fix the body and how the patient's state of mind is. One man said to me, one man who'd been particularly traumatized, He's actually said to me, my leg is getting better, but I'm not. You know, and it's just so revealing and so worrying that that's the case. One more quote from the Yogavichara. At that time, the Holy Buddha, the Master, just about to enter Nibbana, experienced compassion for the countless beings who stagnate in the hell worlds, overcome by suffering and unhappiness. The Holy One, the Buddha, considered in his heart, since things are so, it is fitting that I, the Tathagata, have King Yama, King Death, come in order to entrust to him the holy teaching. I love that, but it took me a long, long time to understand why would King Yama be the one who the Buddha taught the holy teaching to? And I think it was many, many times working with patients who are sick, working with patients who are dying, that the real question was a very simple question. Sickness, aging, and death are facts. And just seeing the absolute factualness of those. There's one particular sutta, I've forgotten the name of it, that's called The Facts, the contemplation on the facts. Such a good sutta. I'm going to miss that one. One of the things that's come up in chaplaincy is that in the West, chaplaincy was developed by the Christian chaplains, and they use Christian models of reflection. So that's just an example. There's a spelling mistake on there, but that's not mine, under feelings. But what's very interesting when you look at this is a model for developing professional skills, and yet the only thing here that has any resemblance to me of meditation is where it says in number 4, analysis, what sense can you make of the situation? What sense can you make as a chaplain with a patient, with a sick patient in front of you? What sense can you make of the situation? That's the starting point, but it doesn't tell you very much. So I found this model quite useful. It's not my finding, actually. It's a Buddhist in America called Stanford. We struggle because there are very there's very little literature on Buddhist chaplaincy. But this model is quite interesting. The model of really answers the question, what does a chaplain do? Answer, the chaplain listens. And I go back to Thich Nhat Hanh's formulation or reformulation of the precepts, where he says the 4th precept is deep listening and beautiful speech. So what does a chaplain do? They listen. And what do they do after that? They listen. And they listen with greater and greater depth. And depth is an interesting idea, because one idea that's quite current amongst chaplains of all faiths is that because chaplains have a depth, or because chaplains should have or might have a depth of practice, then it's possible from that depth of practice that they're able to help those in a place of deepest trouble. Because often patients get into awful mental places as well as physical places. So because of depth of practice, so it's absolutely essential that a chaplain practices of some kind, but a practice that's live and creates depth. But they don't just listen, but it's very important that they don't, the old model of Christian chaplains was they went in there they carried their black book with them, and they would tell the patient that they'd done wrong and that they need to confess their sins now before it was too late. That was what chaplains were like a long time ago. Unfortunately, some still are, not many. But then the second of these 3 wisdoms, difficult to translate the word, Chintamaya Prana, but Chintamaya Mai, but I think what it's saying really is the chaplain has been listening and is still listening and is trying to make sense of what they're hearing through the depth of their knowing, their knowledge, their understanding of teaching. Maybe doctrine and practice. And that they're reflecting from there. So that place is a place that's trainable through practice, through chaplaincy practice. But I particularly like the third wisdom here, but because it's Bhavana. Because Bhavana is putting into practice or cultivating whatever it is that you're experiencing, that you're sensing, trying to find what would be a helpful response for you to say. And it may be that nothing needs saying. That's still a helpful response. One occasion I remember a chaplain friend of mine saying this was a really difficult situation. He was with a family, the patient was dying, the patient died. He couldn't find anything to say. He struggled, and he disappeared at some point. The next day, by accident, he bumped into the family, and the family said, "We're so grateful that you too struggled with what we were struggling with." Very interesting. So empathy is another very important quality, which of course is mudita, principle of joy and happiness in each other's joy and happiness, and also compassion. There's an empathetic response. Have we got much time? 10 minutes? 3 minutes? Oh dear. So these are the questions really that we're faced with. The focus has, as multicultural, multi-faith chaplaincy has developed in the West, has been very simply on what does a chaplain contribute to improved healthcare outcomes. So at the end of the day, what does a chaplain do? It's no good saying to the NHS manager, we listen. It's no good saying we're there to be beside people. That's not enough. We have to in some way. And the second point, use some kind of measurable outcomes. But on one occasion, somebody was saying, well, can we just check while you're doing meditation with this patient? We'll put a little thing on their finger and measure their heartbeat. That's the evidence that it works. And no. So the ethnographic approach, or the ethnographic approach of just asking the question, what is being said here? What are we hearing? Where is this coming from? And how do we respond? Is a much more valuable approach. I have a problem with the research side of this, that it is inevitably, if I'm researching me, it's auto-ethnographic, and I have to be really careful that it's not me putting the ideas on the interpretation. So the research is tricky, and I've very little, there's 3 books being published on Buddhist chaplaincy, all from America. So we're looking to develop holistic models of care, particularly looking at Buddhist models of healthcare. To me, I've found one that I think is the right one, called the Patthana. Seems to offer so much. I have a couple of case studies, but we've no time to do the case studies, where I've actually looked through for those qualities. But just one that occurred during Sarah's talk was about the, what was the one you said? Paccajata, how the future provides the conditioning force for change. The process of healthcare is in 2 stages, and one stage the doctors need to take the lead. That is surgery, that is maybe some medication, and so on and so forth. The second stage, and I've many times experienced this, where the doctors have said, not just yet, now they're ready, I hand over to you. And it's wonderful when they hand that over to you. And that's the stage we call recovery, at which there's such an opportunity to input good work. Thank you.
Thank you for the two wonderful presentations. I wouldn't want to take up, your time by commenting on them. I just like to open up the floor to question and answer. Just raise your hand, so you can ask question. But first, identify yourself, say who you are, brief, and make your question brief, please. Yeah.
Hello. I'm Taunggyi from University of Abhidhamma. Just one discussion and one question for each of you. Discussion is for Sarah, is about the Purijata. About the Purijata.
Yes.
I also don't understand, personally, I also don't understand about the voucher analogy. So I prefer to use the analogy of the tree and the rain. The tree, you just look at the outside of the tree, this is grown up on the mountain, it comes before, and then rains comes after, and then nourishes the tree. That is the perfect example for the...
That's very nice, yes. Pachajata, yes.
Thank you. The question is for Kate. Do you have any chance to take a look at the NDE, near-death experience related to this samatha? Thank you.
Near-death experience is a field in itself, isn't it? It's a field of interest where people who've had near-death, well, very powerful experiences where they've got close to death, do all sorts of investigations and so on and so forth. Not specifically, although I think what I found most interesting is the first piece of research I did was with heart transplant patients. And they were very specifically hospitalized. So their heart failure was such they couldn't go home, and they needed to be in hospital waiting for a heart. And talk about NHS management. On one occasion, I noticed people were on a ward where they could look out the window and see the helicopter coming with the heart. And I thought this was rather like raising expectations, because often what happens is a heart is flown into a hospital, the patient's taken along, they have a look, and it's deemed not a match. So in terms of the roller coaster of emotion that people go through, it's literally from one extreme to another. But what I found through doing meditation with patients before, on one occasion, literally 5 minutes before they went down to the operation and afterwards, was that some quite curious things happened that took me a little bit by surprise in terms of their personal experience. For many people, it strengthened their relationships with family and friends. Far more than I expected. It came up again and again and again in questions, what's been going on for you, and so on and so forth. Very interesting. But again, this is what I was saying before about how it's very important to appreciate when this is a life-death experience, because these are very strong governing conditions to what's taking place. They're dominant desires.
Thank you. Yes, Sally here, in the front row.
Thank you so much to both of you. First of all, I am Panya Theri. I am a PhD candidate in SSBU in this university. To Sarah, Dr. Sarah, thank you for your presentation. I'm working on grief management in Buddhist psychology, my thesis. So initially, I included like Abhidhamma perspective a little bit in my thesis and Suttanta perspective, but not yet Patthana perspective. So it is, I got an idea to consider from your presentation.
Yeah.
It is really, really helpful to my thesis. Thank you so much. And
I hope it goes well.
yeah, and of course my supervisor, her expertise is Patthana, so I can learn from her, and I got an idea, in this morning, so thank you so much for your presentation. Yeah. Okay, secondly to Mr. Keith, I have one question in your presentation. What I understand is Yoniso Manasikara from our Rector Seattle's Dhamma talk also. So based on Yoniso Manasikara, wise attention, we can have positive emotion or positive thinking. Right. So in your presentation, okasa, we can contemplate like okasa. Can it happen, wise attention, just contemplating as okasa? Can you please explain?
Thank you. A good question. Just talking from experience, many people, both in meditation center and secular context that I've worked with, struggle that we've done 20 minutes meditation, half an hour's meditation. What do I do with the rest of the day? And so being able to recollect practice, bring back to mind, bring back into the mind. And it's quite interesting, what is that process? Bringing back into the mind, remaking in the mind. You're not dwelling in a memory, you're bringing something into the moment of what you had worked with on the cushion while you're meditating. Yeah? So I think that's what's important about it, that it's possible to do that all the time with different dhammas. And the question is, what dhamma does the mind and body most need right now? But it's to me, for the first time when I did this, I properly understood the difference between a kind of passive investigation and actively investigating. Because the active investigation, I was bringing something into the mind that was there, but buried. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your answer.
We have two there. I'd like to give it to Dr. Huamin, who is from Yangon Hospital, and then to Professor Lam.
First of all, I would like to congratulate the organizing committee for a very such inspiring conference, and congratulate both of the speakers for very good lectures. I'm Dr. Wawa Minzu. I'm an oncologist and palliative care clinician. And as I treat the cancer patient, I'm very much interested in spiritual care. And thank you so much, Dr. Keith, for bringing the topic of intuitive listening. And in your PowerPoint, I would like to know about holistic care model of care.
This may help, but one of the things that I found working with cancer patients was the extraordinary difference of how to offer and how to encourage meditation or mindfulness, a bit of both. I use quite a lot of samatha meditation, which makes it different from some of the mindfulness. That depending on the type of cancer, so the meditation is different. So it dawned on me one day when I was working with a group of patients who had non-terminal cancer, because the need seemed very different. And I just hadn't twigged, just hadn't hit me that somebody with terminal cancer, the need is to focus on death. The need in a non-terminal cancer is to focus on how am I going to live with cancer? And there's such different conditions. So I think that's part of holistic, is recognizing the complete uniqueness in each condition, but as well ensuring that you've included, if you like, the whole 24 pachayas. You've included the sense of the whole forest, the whole, not just the individual tree, so that all parts of the body and mind are affected by this. And it's very interesting with some patients who've lost sensitivity in parts of the body, that you work on being aware of the whole body. And, you know, fascinating results that works, even though there's no sensitivity in a whole area of the body. So it is wholeness.
So what's the meaning of holistic model of care?
What are the elements?
What are the elements?
I think there are lots of different ways of doing it. The normal, well, body and mind is enough as a start, or body, heart and mind is enough of a start. But I think something a little bit more, with a little bit more precision about what exactly is taking place here, what are the conditions that are taking place. I also particularly like Sarah's approach of taking a context and exploring all 24 pachayas working in that context. That, I think, is a really useful encouragement. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Professor Lamni.
Yes. First, I would like to pay my homage to the Venerable Rector Siaro and other members of Sangha. Then I would like to say thank you to both of the speakers for your excellent presentations. So when Mr. Kidd mentioned about that heart transplantations, I remembered an article when at the time in 1970s, the heart transplantations were first introduced in America by Dr. Barnard. So at the time, I read an article. It said a lady received a heart transplantation. So at first, she was no smoker. But after the heart transplantation, she became, maybe after 1 or 2 weeks, she became a chain smoker. Then they found out that the donor of the heart was a chain smoker. So my question is, according to your maybe comments or maybe your opinion, is it due to because that heart, Hariya is the seat of the mind, or it is due to some medical reasons? So thank you very much.
All I can say is, good question.
I think the debate whether heart or brain is the seat of the mind is a little bit, I don't use the word outdated, and it has long overtaken by other debates, and with a lot of neurological research going on. What I know is that at Madrid University, where I've been visiting for the last 3 years, they were on the heart. They were on the heart, and in America, they focus more on the brain.
Yeah, thank you very much, Venerable Rector Seattle, for giving me this opportunity. Both presentations are incredibly very motivating. And my interest especially goes to Buddhist chaplaincy because it is totally quite new to us. So I would like to know, what are the challenges that you might have encountered as the first experience as a Buddhist chaplain, and like any message that you would like to give for us, like we know a bit of the Buddhist psychology or Abhidhamma, and anything how we relate rather than apart from these 6 pairs. So any message that you would like to give? Thank you very much.
A personal message is not to take it personally. But what I mean by that is that the 2 practices that have developed for me, but also for other people, that when we arrive, before we go into the work, we pay respect, and when we finish, when we're about to go home, we acknowledge the loving kindness for all other beings. We acknowledge the gratitude of having had the opportunity. Those two things are very important. And those are the very same things that staff struggle with. They struggle with taking the problems home with them as personal problems. My patient.
I hope you don't mind me coming in here that I've taught some people who work in hospices. I've taught people who've worked in hospices, and the thing they've found so useful from Buddhist teaching is the notion that as the approach of death, for instance, you actually arouse memories or recollections of good things people have done in their life. And I taught some British hospice workers, and they were quite shocked at first because they were told they have to be compassionate all the time. And actually, they saw then that at a particular life instant, like the approach of death, trying to arouse sympathetic joy and reminding people of acts of generosity. Really, the earlier pachayas, the conditions which have brought about this moment, how they can be helpful to them. So I think your own indigenous, the Burmese Buddhist systems have a lot to offer Western chaplaincy that we could learn from.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shan.
Thank you, everyone, for your questions and interest. And I'd like to thank Dr. Shaw and Kid Manning for their wonderful presentation. If you compare with the session that is coming up, this session brings you the experiences of application of the Abhidhamma in the United Kingdom, in particular, and in the West in general. Buddhist chaplaincy and also applying the 24 Patthana in daily life. This is done, in the Western context. So I think without further ado, this is time for the break already. I'd like to thank once again everyone, the speakers and all the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah and speaker. Now, without taking much time, now it is time to present certificate and give to speaker. So may I request Rector Sarah, the chair, to present the certificate to our speaker, Sharak Shaw. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Next, may I also request invite Shadot to present the certificate and give to sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So now may I invite Mr. Chausos to present the gift to our Rector Siara.
These three scholars, they are from the Samatha Trust Meditation Association and also Buddhist Study in the United Kingdom. This is their work, Abhidhamma papers. Okay, this is for our library. This is Abhidhamma Adventures. Okay, adventures.
I use it in my teaching. Thank you.
And this is from their teacher, and from whom I learned so much. This is from Dr. Lan's cousin.